The knock came at 12:07 a.m., exactly 20 minutes after we'd left Halifax. 3 measured raps against metal coming from the direction of car 3. I checked my watch, still set 3 minutes fast like always, then pulled out the laminated rule card from my breast pocket. My thumb had worn a smooth spot on the corner from checking it so often. Rule 1 stared back at me in bold letters. Never enter cars 3 through 7. The knocking repeated. Same rhythm, same intensity, like someone following a script. I should have stayed in my seat, should have kept counting the track joints clicking beneath us. I was at 1,847 and ignored whatever was happening back there. That's what the rules demanded. That's what kept things predictable, safe, contained. But here's the thing about rules. They only work if everyone follows them. I stood up, my knees popping from sitting in the same position since departure. The black dog that always rode in car 1 lifted its massive head from its paws, amber eyes tracking my movement. The temperature felt normal, maybe 68 degrees. The lights hummed at their usual frequency. Everything exactly as it should be except for that knocking. Just checking, I told the dog, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to explain myself to it. Someone might be hurt. The dog's ears flattened against its skull. The connecting door to car 2 opened smooth and silent. I kept all the hinges oiled myself. Car 2 held the usual late-night passengers, a university student with earbuds in, an elderly couple sharing a thermos of tea, a businessman typing on his laptop. None of them looked up as I passed. The businessman's screen reflected nothing but black, even though I could hear him typing. The door to car 3 shouldn't have been open. I'd checked it myself during pre-departure inspection, confirmed the lock engaged, verified the seal intact. But now it stood maybe 3 inches ajar, just enough to see darkness beyond. The metal frame around the door had 4 parallel scratches gouged into it, fresh enough that silver metal showed through the paint. I counted my heartbeats, 1 through 12, before reaching for the handle. "Hello?" My voice came out steadier than expected. "This car is off limits to passengers." "Oh, thank God." A man's voice from inside, pleasant and slightly confused. "I've been knocking forever. Think my ticket's wrong. It says car 3, but the door was locked." Every instinct screamed at me to walk away. The rules existed for a reason. But what if someone really was stuck? What if the ticketing system had glitched? I'd have to file an incident report either way, and they'd want to know why I didn't at least investigate. I pulled the door open another foot and leaned in. Brian Miles stood in the middle of the aisle, maybe 30 feet back. At least, I assumed it was Brian Miles. That's what his ticket said when he held it up. Brown wool suit, brown Oxfords, auburn hair slicked back like he'd stepped out of an old movie. The emergency lighting cast weird shadows, making his skin look almost translucent, like rice paper held up to a lamp. "Sir, you need to come back to car 2 immediately." I kept one foot firmly planted in car 2, my hand gripping the door frame. "This section is closed." "But my ticket." He stepped closer, and something was off about how he moved. Too smooth, like he was gliding instead of walking. "See? Car 3, seat 14B. He held the ticket higher. I'd have to step inside to read it properly. "Doesn't matter what it says. Car 3 is off limits. Please come with me now." Brian smiled, and for a second I could have sworn I saw his reflection in the window beside him. Only it was smiling differently. Or maybe not smiling at all. "I've been waiting so long for company." His voice did something impossible then. It multiplied like 3 or 4 people speaking in almost perfect unison, each voice slightly off tempo from the others. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in clouds, and frost spread across the windows in fractals. "We've been waiting so long for company." More voices joined the chorus. 5, 6, a dozen. All coming from Brian's mouth, even though his lips barely moved. His body started to stretch, not all at once. First his fingers, extending like putty being pulled, joints adding segments that shouldn't exist. then his arms, reaching toward me even though he hadn't taken another step. His neck elongated, his head tilting at angles that would snap a normal person's spine. I stumbled backward, slamming into the door frame. My hand found the emergency lock by muscle memory. We drilled this monthly, even though nobody ever said why. The mechanism engaged with a solid thunk. Through the window, Brian's face was pressed against the glass. No, faces. Multiple versions of him overlapping. Some young, some old, some that barely looked human anymore. They shifted and merged and separated like double-exposed film. The lights in car 3 went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. Just gone, leaving nothing but black beyond the window except for eyes. Dozens of pale green eyes reflecting the emergency lighting from car 2. Something slammed into my leg. I nearly screamed before realizing it was the black dog, pressing against me, every muscle tense. A growl rumbled from deep in its chest, so low I felt it more than heard it. The eyes in car 3 blinked out one by one until only darkness remained. My hands shook as I backed away from the door. Not trembling, full-on shaking like I grabbed a live wire. I made it 3 steps before my legs gave out and I dropped into the nearest seat. The dog immediately jumped up beside me, its massive weight oddly comforting. "Good boy," I managed, though my voice cracked. "Good, whatever you are." The elderly woman across the aisle glanced up from her tea. "Everything all right, dear?" I wanted to laugh, or cry, or explain that something wearing a human suit had just tried to... What? Invite me to a party? Eat me? I didn't even know. "Just checking the doors," I said instead. "Standard procedure." She nodded and returned to her tea. The businessman kept typing on his black screen. The students' music leaked from their earbuds, something classical, played backward. I stood on shaking legs and made my way back to car 1, the dog padding beside me. Once there, I collapsed into my conductor's seat and gestured to the one across from me, the one I'd started thinking of as the dog's seat. "All yours," I told it. The dog jumped up, circled twice, and settled down, but its eyes never left the door to car 2. I pulled out the rule card again, staring at rule 1 until the words blurred. Never enter cars 3 through 7. Such a simple instruction. So easy to follow. My hands were still shaking. I started counting track joints again, starting from 1048. The rhythm helped, gave me something to focus on besides Brian's stretching fingers and multiplying voices, besides the scratches on the door frame that hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. At joint 2156, I finally stopped shaking. At 2489, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. At 2847, something knocked on the door between cars 1 and 2. 3 measured raps, exactly like before. The black dog growled. I kept counting. The train wasn't supposed to stop at Rivière-Baudet, not at 1:15 a.m., not ever at this hour. But the brakes engaged anyway. That metal-on-metal shriek cutting through my count at track joint 3062. I checked my watch, 1:12, which meant 1:15 actual time, then looked at the schedule card clipped above my seat. Next stop, Coteau, 1:47 a.m. We were nowhere near a platform, just empty track surrounded by Quebec farmland and February darkness. The black dog stood up, hackles raised, staring at the door. "Yeah, I don't like it either," I told it, getting to my feet. My knees protested. I'd been sitting rigid since the Brian Miles thing, afraid to move, afraid to think too hard about what I'd seen. Through the window, I could make out a small concrete platform I'd never noticed before. No station building, no lights, just a strip of concrete beside the tracks with a faded sign I couldn't read in the dark. How many times had I ridden this route? Hundreds? And I'd never seen this stop. Someone was standing on the platform. A woman, middle-aged, wearing what looked like a burgundy coat. She stood perfectly still, arms at her sides facing the train, waiting. I pulled out the rule card. though I'd memorized it weeks ago. Rule 2. Only passengers with valid tickets may board. Simple enough. I just explained we weren't supposed to stop here, check her ticket if she had one, and send her away if she didn't. Professional. By the book. The door controls shouldn't have worked. They're locked between stations, but the button lit green when I pressed it. The door hissed open, letting in air so cold it made my teeth ache. "Ma'am, this isn't a scheduled stop," I called out, staying well inside the train. "I'll need to see your ticket." She walked toward me, and something was off about her gait. Not quite limping, but like her legs weren't the same length, or maybe weren't always the same length. The platform light... Wait. There was a platform light now, a single yellow bulb, made her shadow stretch and contract with each step. "My daughter," she said, and her voice had this breathless quality, like she'd been running. "Carol's already on the train. She needs her medication." She held up a prescription bottle, shaking it so the pills rattled. The label was faded, but I could make out a date. March 1987. "I'll need to see your ticket, ma'am." "I don't..." "Carol has the tickets. Both of them. She's 8. She can't travel alone. You have to let me..." She reached the door, and I got my first clear look at her face. Scarlett Freeman, according to the name tag still pinned to her coat from some long-ago real estate conference. Strawberry blonde hair that might have been styled once but now hung in uneven chunks. Her eyes were gray-blue and bloodshot, darting between me and the windows of the train like she was trying to see through the walls. "Ma'am, without a ticket..." "Carol!" She screamed it so loud I stepped back. "Carol, Mommy's here." Silence. Then, from somewhere behind me, maybe car 4 or 5, came a child's voice. "Mama!" My blood turned to ice water. Nothing should be in those cars. Nothing could be in those cars. Scarlett tried to push past me, but I blocked the doorway. "Ma'am, you can't..." She hit the door frame with both fists, not slapping or knocking, full-force punches that made the whole train car vibrate. "That's my daughter. Carol! Carol!" "Mama, I'm scared." The child's voice again, clearer now. Definitely from car 4. I turned to look, and through the windows between cars I saw something pressed against the glass of car 4. Small hands, a child's face framed by blonde pigtails. She was crying, or at least her mouth was making crying shapes. No sound reached us except that disembodied voice. Scarlett's pounding intensified. The metal door frame started to dent inward with each hit. Her knuckles split open, leaving bloody smears, but she didn't slow down. "Let me in. She needs her medication. She'll die without it, please." The child in car 4 pressed harder against the glass. As I watched, she started aging, her face stretching, hair graying, body growing taller, then shrinking back to child size, then aging again. A whole lifetime in seconds, over and over. "That's not..." I started to say, but Scarlett's fist punched through the door. Not past it, through it. Her hand burst through the reinforced steel like it was paper, grabbing for me. I jerked back and her arm followed, stretching impossibly long, elbow bending in places elbows shouldn't exist. "Give me my daughter." Her other fist smashed through, both arms now inside the train, reaching and grasping. Her fingers had too many joints, clicking and extending like telescoping rods. One hand caught my sleeve, and where she touched, the fabric started to frost over. The black dog lunged, jaws snapping at her writhing arms, but its teeth passed right through like she wasn't entirely there, or wasn't entirely here. "Mama!" The Carol thing in car 4 was pounding on the glass now, aging and dying and being reborn with each strike. "Mama, it hurts." Scarlett's face pressed against the hole she'd made in the door, and for a second she looked normal, just a desperate mother trying to reach her child. Then her mouth opened too wide, showing rows of teeth that went back farther than a throat should go. "She's mine," she hissed, and her breath smelled like old flowers and formaldehyde. "Give her back!" A hand touched Scarlett's writhing arms. Not grabbed, just touched, gentle as a blessing. The man in the trench coat stood beside me, though I hadn't heard him approach. His silver-gloved fingers rested on Scarlett's stretched flesh, and where they made contact, her skin started to crystallize. Not freezing, transforming, becoming something between ice and glass. "Mrs. Freeman," he said, and his voice was soft, almost kind. "Carol is where she needs to be." "No!" Scarlett tried to pull back, but the crystallization spread up her arms like water soaking into paper. "She needs me. She needs her medication." "The medication expired 37 years ago," the trenchcoat man said, "as did Carol." The crystal reached Scarlett's shoulders. She looked at me, and for just a moment her eyes were perfectly clear, perfectly sane, perfectly heartbroken. "I could have saved her," she whispered, "if I'd just chosen different seats." Then she shattered, not explosively, more like a controlled demolition, pieces falling away in sequence. Her arms went first, collapsing into glittering dust, then her shoulders, her torso, her legs. She tried to crawl backward on limbs that no longer existed, leaving trails of crystal fragments on the platform. The Carol thing in car 4 matched her screams, aging and dying faster now, a strobe light of human existence. 8 to 80 in half a second. Baby to corpse and back. Then silence. The platform was empty. No crystal shards, no blood, no sign anyone had been there. The door sealed itself, metal flowing like liquid to fill the holes Scarlett had made. The trenchcoat man tipped his hat to me, a gesture that belonged to another era. "You did well, Mr. Torres. Rules exist for a reason." He walked toward the wall of the train, not toward the door, toward the solid wall, and passed through it like it was mist, leaving only the faint scent of old paper and silver polish. The train started moving again, smooth as silk, like we'd never stopped. I sat down hard, my legs finally giving out. The black dog pressed against me, solid and warm and real. My hands were shaking again, worse than before. I shoved them in my pockets to make them stop. My fingers found paper that hadn't been there before. A note, written in fountain pen on stationery that felt decades old. "The child was never real. Check your manifest for 1987. I pulled out my phone, hands still trembling, and searched for train 447 derailment 1987. The results loaded slowly on the weak signal, but there it was. March 15th, 1987. 43 casualties. The manifest was public record, part of the accident report. I scrolled through the names, past Benjamin Adams and Sarah Chen and all the others until I found it. Meyer, Carol, age 8. Traveling with mother, survivor. Freeman, Scarlett, survivor. But Scarlett had been on the platform. Scarlett had punched through solid steel. Scarlett had shattered like crystal when the trenchcoat man touched her. I looked back at car 4. The Carol thing was gone, but there was something written in the condensation on the glass. 4 words in a child's backward scrawl. "Mama didn't save me." The black dog whined, pressing harder against my leg. I scratched behind its ears absently, staring at those words until they faded away. Track joint 4247 clicked beneath us. Then 4248, 4249. I kept counting because counting was safe. Counting was sane. Counting didn't require me to think about dead children who aged in loops, or mothers who could punch through steel, or men who walked through walls. At joint 4500, I finally stopped shaking. At 4631, I almost convinced myself the manifest was wrong. At 499999, I realized I'd have to walk past car 4 to check the other passengers. I stayed in my seat and kept counting. The 1987 accident records made for terrible reading at 11:23 p.m. in the Montreal station's fluorescent glare. 43 dead when train 447 derailed just outside Rivière-Baudet. I scrolled through the casualty list on my phone, matching names to faces I'd been seeing, or thought I'd been seeing, for weeks now. Meyer, Carol, age 8. Freeman, Scarlett, age 41. But the manifest said Scarlett survived. The news articles, too. Survivor, they all said, like that word meant something definitive. Like survival was a binary state. Alive or dead. Nothing in between. I kept scrolling. Each name felt heavier than the last, like they were accumulating weight in my chest. Benjamin Adams, 34, businessman. Sarah Chen, 22, student. Brian Miles. I stopped. Read it again. Miles. Brian. Age 34, traveling salesman. The same Brian who'd stretched like taffy in car 3, who'd spoken in overlapping voices, who'd been waiting so long for company. My phone battery died even though it had been at 60%. The screen went black, reflecting my face in the station's harsh light. I looked exhausted, looked like someone who'd been seeing dead people for weeks and just now figured it out. Interesting reading? I jumped. A man stood beside me. When had he gotten there? Wearing a conductor's uniform from another era. Navy wool, brass buttons, the works. Even had the old-style cap with the railway logo that got discontinued in the 90s. Terry Roach, he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but cold, like shaking hands with refrigerated meat. I'll be riding with you tonight. He held up his ticket. Fresh printer paper, crisp edges, that new ink smell. But the date printed on it read, March 15th, 1987. That's... I started, then stopped. What was I going to say? That his ticket was impossible? Everything about this job had become impossible. A bit unusual, yes. Terry smiled, and his teeth were too white, too straight. But then, you're getting used to unusual, aren't you, Mr. Torres? He knew my name. I hadn't introduced myself. How do you... I used to work this route. He adjusted his cap, a gesture so familiar it made my hands itch to mirror it. Back in '87, right up until the accident. The platform clock showed 11:44, 3 minutes until departure. I should have been doing my pre-check, making sure the train was ready. Instead, I stood there staring at a dead man with a valid ticket. You were on the train when it derailed? I was conducting it. His smile faltered. Followed every rule, did everything right. Still killed 43 people. We boarded in silence. The black dog was already in car 1, sitting in the middle of the aisle like it was waiting for something. When it saw Terry, it growled. Not aggressive, more like recognition. Like seeing someone you'd hoped never to meet again. Hello, old friend, Terry said to it. The dog's ears flattened. I gestured to the seat across from mine. That's usually where the dog sits, yes. Terry remained standing. You've been treating it well, that's good, that's important. He walked to the window facing car 2 and just stood there, looking through the glass into the darkness of the closed car. I could see his reflection, but it was wrong. Too young, then too old, flickering between states like a TV with bad reception. You've been asking questions, he said, looking up old records, trying to understand. Shouldn't I? The other conductors thought that too. He turned to face me, and for a second his face was skeletal, skin pulled tight over bone. Then it snapped back to normal. They're all still here, you know. Every conductor who tried to understand instead of just following the rules. Where? He pointed toward car 3. I looked, really looked, for the first time since the Brian Miles incident. The door was closed, but through the window I could see them. Dozens of faces pressed against the glass, all wearing conductor uniforms from different decades, all watching me with hollow eyes. Jesus Christ. He doesn't ride this train. Terry pulled something from his pocket, another laminated rule card, this one yellow with age. The rules are breaking down, Mr. Torres. You've been poking at the boundaries and now they're getting thin. He was right. I could feel it. A wrongness in the air like static before lightning. The temperature kept shifting, hot, cold, hot again. The lights flickered in patterns that spelled out words I didn't want to read. Every time a conductor starts asking why, instead of just accepting what is, the train gets hungrier. Terry's young face morphed into an old man's, then back. It needs us to maintain the boundaries, keep the living and dead separated, but you've been inviting them to mix. I haven't invited anything. You let Scarlett get close. You looked Brian in the eye. You acknowledged them as real. He shook his head. Now, they all want acknowledgement. They all want to be seen. The faces in car 3 pressed harder against the glass. I could hear them now. A whisper that built to a murmur that threatened to become a scream. All saying the same thing. See us, see us, see us. Terry handed me his rule card. It was identical to mine except for one addition at the bottom. Rule 6. Never seek the truth about car 7. Car 7? I looked up at him. What's in? But Terry was already walking backward toward car 2, not turning around and walking backward, his knees bending the wrong way, his head rotating to keep watching me while his body moved away. Some doors should stay closed, Mr. Torres. Some truths are too heavy for the living to carry. He reached the door to car 2. It opened without him touching it. Wait. I tried to understand too, he said, still moving backward. Spent 20 years in car 3, learning why that was a mistake. Don't join us, just follow the rules. He passed through into car 2, then car 3. The door opened for him there too, and the pressed faces pulled back to make room. As he entered, they flowed around him like water, absorbing him into their mass. I caught a glimpse of him trying to scream before he disappeared entirely. The door slammed shut. I looked down at my own rule card, the one I'd carried for weeks. The text was changing, letters rearranging themselves like insects. Rule 1 no longer said, never enter cars 3 through 7. Now it read, stay in the front car only. The black dog whined and pressed against my leg. Through the window, I could see the faces in car 3 had multiplied. Hundreds now, maybe thousands, all pressed together in a space that couldn't possibly hold them all looking at me, all waiting. The train lurched forward. 11:47 p.m., right on schedule. I sat down in my conductor's seat, pulled out my notebook, and started counting track joints. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm helped, gave me something to focus on besides the sound now coming from car 3. Hundreds of voices counting along with me, always one number behind, like an echo that knew what came next. At joint 47, I realized they weren't counting track joints. They were counting down. The train slowed for the 2:30 a.m. stop at Coteau, and I knew something was wrong before we even stopped moving. Through the window, I could see them lined up on the platform. 20 people, maybe more, all waiting in perfect formation like they'd rehearsed it. I checked my watch. 2:27, so 2:30 actual time, right on schedule. The black dog stood up from its seat, not growling this time, whimpering. Yeah, I see them too, I told it, though I wished I didn't. They weren't right. Even from inside the train, I could tell. One woman held her umbrella upside down in the rain that wasn't falling. A man in a business suit had his tie on backward. Not just backward, but like the fabric itself ran in reverse. And they all held tickets. Every single one of them, holding their tickets out like offerings. The door opened on its own. I didn't touch the controls. They boarded in single file, each one stopping to show me their ticket. The first man handed his over, and I watched the paper age in my hand, crisp and new, then yellowing, then crumbling to dust, then reforming fresh from the ashes. The date kept cycling, March 15, 1987 to today, to dates that hadn't happened yet then, back to 1987. Car 1, seat 12A, he said, except the words came out backward. A 12-seat, one car. I recognized his face from the articles. Benjamin Adams, the businessman whose laptop I'd seen him typing on with a black screen. He'd died in the derailment, crushed when car 4 folded in on itself. "Sir, this car is—" I started, but he was already walking backward to his seat, his knees bending the wrong way with each step. The next passenger, Sarah Chen. I'd seen her with earbuds playing classical music in reverse. Her ticket did the same aging cycle, and she spoke backward too, taking a seat without waiting for my response. They kept coming. All 20 of them. All dead. All taking seats in car 1 like they belonged here. The car only had 40 seats, and half were already occupied by living passengers who didn't seem to notice anything wrong. The dead just overlapped them, sat in the same space without touching, existing in parallel. Then I saw her, Carol Meyer, 8 years old, blonde pigtails with red ribbons. She stood in the aisle, no parent in sight, clutching a teddy bear that was simultaneously new and rotting. As I watched, she aged, her face stretching, body growing, hair graying, until she was an elderly woman in the same school uniform. Then she snapped back to 8. The whole cycle took 30 seconds. "Ticket, please," I managed to say. She held it out during her teenage phase, and by the time I took it, she was elderly. The ticket showed car 1, seat 7B. Of course it was seat 7. "Thank you, mister," she said in an old woman's voice from a child's mouth, then walked to her seat, aging and dying and being reborn with each step. The last passenger made me stop breathing. It was me. Another Mike Torres, wearing the same conductor's uniform but covered in blood. Not fresh blood, old, brown, dried to rust. He held out his ticket with one hand and a conductor's badge with the other. The badge was mine. Had my employee number, my photo, but cracked down the middle with blood in the crack. "You don't want to see this ticket," he said, and his voice was exactly mine but exhausted like he'd been awake for decades. "Rule 5 says—" "Screw Rule 5. He pushed past me, and where our shoulders touched, I felt nothing. Not cold, not warm, just absence. "We need to talk." The other me sat down in my conductor's seat. My seat. The black dog backed away from him, then started howling, a sound I'd never heard it make before. Not quite dog, not quite human, but something between that made my teeth ache. The dead passengers all covered their ears. Blood started leaking from their eyes, their noses, their ears, but they didn't move otherwise. Just sat there bleeding and trying not to hear. "Tonight's the night," the other Mike said. "The cycle completes. 37 years and we're going back to the beginning. What are you talking about?" The train lurched forward, but wrong. Too fast. The track joints stopped clicking in rhythm and became a continuous scream of metal. Through the window, the landscape blurred into streaks of light. Every conductor gets this choice eventually. He pulled out a rule card, but this one was different, burned around the edges with rules I couldn't read because they kept changing. Stay and become the guardian, or break everything and set them free. The walls between cars started dissolving, not breaking or shattering, dissolving like sugar in water. I could see through into car 2, where more dead passengers sat overlapping with the living. Car 3, where hundreds of failed conductors pressed against nothing, trying to escape space that no longer existed. And beyond that, car 7. I'd never seen car 7, never been able to see it. But now, with the walls going translucent, I could make out shapes. A frozen moment, like a photograph made of reality. The original train, 447, twisted metal and shattered glass, bodies suspended mid-death. 43 people caught in the exact second of dying. Neither alive nor dead, just stopping. "Jesus," I whispered. "He really doesn't ride this train," the other me said. "But someone has to. Someone has to keep them contained, keep the living and dead separated. Keep the cycle going so it doesn't all collapse." The black dog's howling got louder. The dead passengers were crying blood now, thick streams running down their faces. Carol Meyer aged faster, 8 to 80 in 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second, just a blur of existence. Through the dissolving walls, I saw him approaching. The trenchcoat man, walking through the ghost walls like they were nothing. But as he got closer, he started changing. The coat dissolved, revealing a conductor's uniform underneath. His face shifted, became younger, became someone specific. "Jacob Marshall," he said when he reached us. "First conductor on this route after the accident. First one to see what really happened." He looked tired. Not just tired. Exhausted in a way that went beyond physical, like his soul itself needed rest. "I chose to stay," Jacob continued, "to maintain the rules, to keep them all here, safe, contained. But every conductor since has had the same choice. Most join the mass in car 3, some run, but you..." He looked at me, then at the other me. "You're the first to get this far, to see it all." "Why me?" "Because you counted," the other me said. "You followed the rules but questioned them. You saw the patterns but didn't run from them. You're ready to choose." The train kept accelerating. The world outside was just light now, pure white streaming past. We were going back. I could feel it. Time itself bending around us, pulling us toward March 15th, 1987. "What happens if I break the rules?" I asked. Jacob's face went dark. "They all go free. Every soul trapped here released at once. The boundary between living and dead cracks. And you..." He paused. "You either die or become something else. Something needed but terrible. And if I stay, if I maintain the cycle, then you become me," Jacob said simply. "Guardian of the threshold, keeper of rules, forever watching, forever preventing the worst while enabling something nearly as bad." The other me stood up from my seat. "Choose fast. We're almost there." Through the transparent walls, I could see car 7 more clearly. The frozen derailment was moving now, playing out in slow motion. Metal bending, glass shattering, bodies flying, but also reversing, unbreaking, undying, then breaking again. A loop of destruction and restoration. Carol Meyer stood up, aging so fast now she was just a smear of time. She walked over to me, and for one impossible moment, she was every age at once. Baby and child and teen and adult and elderly and dead. "Please," she said in 40 voices, "please choose." The black dog stopped howling. The silence was worse than the sound. I looked at my rule card. 5 rules that kept this nightmare contained, but also perpetuated it. 5 rules that protected the living but trapped the dead. 5 rules I could follow or break. The train hit some kind of barrier, and everything went white. When my vision cleared, we were still moving, but the walls were solid again. The dead passengers remained in their seats, but they were all looking at me, waiting. Even the other me, still in my conductor's seat, watched with my own eyes. Jacob Marshall stood before me, hand extended. In his palm was a new rule card. Blank. "Write the rules," he said, "or break them all, but choose now. We're 30 seconds from 1987. I looked at the card, at the dead passengers, at Carol still cycling through ages, at the other me who might be my future or my past or just another possibility. 20 seconds. The black dog padded over and sat beside me, not pushing me either way, just being there. 10 seconds. I reached for the card. I took the blank card from Jacob's hand and tore it in half. The sound it made wasn't paper ripping. It was glass breaking, metal shrieking, 43 people screaming at once. Jacob's face went from exhausted to terrified in an instant. "You don't understand what you're..." I was already running. Through the ghost of Car 2's wall, past the overlapping dead and living passengers who turned to watch me with synchronized movements. My feet knew where to step, even though the floor kept shifting between modern carpet and 1987's linoleum. Rule 1. Never enter cars 3 through 7. I burst into car 3. The failed conductors, hundreds of them pressed into impossible space, pulled back like I was radioactive. Their mouths moved in unison. Don't. I kept running. Car 4. Carol Meyer stood in the aisle, frozen mid-age at about 14. She looked at me with eyes that belonged to an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old simultaneously. "You're really doing it?" she said, and for once her voice matched her appearance. "Yeah." "It's going to hurt." "I know." Rule 2. Only passengers with valid tickets may board. The train lurched sideways, not on the tracks, but through dimensions. I felt my bones trying to exist in 2 timelines at once. Through the windows, I saw the platform at Rivière-Baudet, but also the same platform 37 years ago, emergency vehicles surrounding twisted metal, Car 5, empty except for shadows that moved without sources. They reached for me with fingers made of absence, but I pushed through them. Each touch felt like losing a memory, but I couldn't stop now. Rule 3. The black dog must be given its seat. Behind me, I heard the dog howling again, not following me, staying in car 1 where it belonged, where the rules said it had to stay. But its howl carried through the walls, through time, a sound of betrayal that made my chest ache. "Sorry," I whispered, though it couldn't hear me. Car 6. This one was full of luggage, suitcases and bags from 1987, perfectly preserved but covered in dust that shouldn't exist. Some were open, contents spilled out, photographs of people who'd died, letters never sent, a child's teddy bear that looked exactly like Carol's. The temperature dropped so fast my next breath came out as ice crystals. Rule 4. Show proper respect to the man in the trench coat. Jacob Marshall materialized in front of me, no longer in his trench coat, but in a 1950s conductor's uniform. His real uniform from when he first started changing things. "Stop." His voice had weight to it, physical force that tried to push me backward. "You don't know what happens when the boundaries collapse." "Tell me then." I stood my ground even though my legs wanted to buckle. "Stop with the mysterious guardian act and just tell me." His face cracked, literally cracked, like old paint. Underneath was another face, younger, terrified. "I caused it," he said, and his voice broke into harmonics. "The derailment. I was experimenting with the train's supernatural properties, trying to understand them. I opened a door between dimensions at exactly the wrong moment. The train tried to exist in 2 realities at once, and 43 people died. Died and didn't die. Got caught between states. I've spent 70 years trying to keep them contained, to prevent the damage from spreading." He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers leaving frost burns through my uniform. "If you break all the rules, they don't just go free. They explode outward. Every person who's ever ridden this train gets pulled into the between space. Or," I said, "they finally get to finish dying." His hands went through me, not past, through like I was becoming insubstantial. "You're already breaking apart," he said. "Please, take the guardian role. Write new rules, better rules. Just don't destroy everything." Rule 5. Always acknowledge the last passenger. I pushed past him. He tried to stop me, but his hands kept phasing through. We were both becoming unstable, existing in too many timelines at once. The door to car 7 had no handle, just smooth metal with frost spreading from its edges. I could hear something behind it. Not sound exactly, but the absence of sound so complete it had its own presence. I kicked it. My foot went through, pulling the rest of me with it. Car 7 was the derailment, not a memory of it, not a representation. The actual moment, frozen but still happening. Metal twisted into impossible shapes, bodies suspended mid-flight, blood drops hanging in air like red stars. And in the center, the original Mike Torres. No, that was wrong. The original conductor from 1987. Terry Roach, young and terrified, his hand frozen on the emergency brake he'd never gotten to pull. I walked through the frozen catastrophe, careful not to touch anything. Each suspended piece of debris hummed with potential energy, wanting to complete its trajectory. The 43 victims were all here, caught in their last seconds, some already dead, some dying, some just realizing something was wrong. At the far end of the car was another door. This one was newer, modern, with a bright red emergency brake beside it. The same brake Terry never pulled. The brake that existed in both timelines because some things transcend temporal boundaries. Behind me, the frozen scene started moving. Tiny movements at first, a blood drop falling an inch, a shard of glass rotating slightly. The victim's eyes tracked my movement. "Please," one of them said without moving their mouth. Then another. "Please." Then all 43. "Please, please, please, please." Jacob materialized beside me, flickering between his trenchcoat form and his original conductor appearance. "If you pull that brake, everything collapses. Both timelines merge. The train arrives empty because everyone, living and dead, gets pulled into the void between realities." Everyone? Everyone who's ever ridden Train 447. Thousands of people. I looked at the victims. At Carol Meyer, 8 years old, suspended mid-scream. At Scarlett Freeman, reaching for her daughter across impossible distance. At Brian Miles, his salesman's smile frozen as glass shards approached his face. "They've been dying for 37 years, I said. "Dying is a moment. This is eternity." "No." I grabbed the brake. "This is hell." I pulled. The sound was every sound at once. Metal tearing, glass shattering, people screaming, time itself cracking like ice. The frozen scene exploded into motion. The victims completed their deaths in fast forward, their bodies dissolving into light as they finally got to stop existing. The train convulsed. Not just the supernatural one. I felt the modern Train 447 shuddering on its tracks, trying to occupy the same space as its destroyed predecessor. Through the windows, I saw both realities. The dark Quebec countryside and the emergency lights of 1987. Jacob screamed, his form splitting into multiple versions. The young conductor who'd made a mistake, the middle-aged guardian who'd tried to fix it, the ancient thing he'd become. All three reached for me, but they were dissolving too, becoming light like the victims. "You don't know what you've done," all three versions said. "I set them free." The light got brighter. The 43 victims rose from their frozen deaths, no longer corpses but something else. Not ghosts, completions. They looked at me with faces that were grateful and terrible and final. Carol Meyer walked over, solid for the first time since I'd seen her. Just 8 years old, no aging cycle, no distortion. A real child who died too young. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was exactly what an 8-year-old should sound like. "We can go now." She took her mother's hand. Scarlett Freeman, sane and whole and crying with relief. They walked into the light together and disappeared. One by one, the others followed. Brian Miles tipped his salesman's hat. Terry Roach saluted with a young man's pride. Even the failed conductors from Car 3, freed from their mass grave, walked into whatever came next. Jacob was the last to go. He stood before me, no longer multiple versions, but just himself, a man who'd made a terrible mistake and spent 70 years trying to fix it. "The train will remember," he said. "It will always remember what happened here. You'll carry that weight now. Better than carrying yours." He almost smiled. Then he walked backward into the light, maintaining protocol even in dissolution. The brightness became everything. I felt myself coming apart, atoms scattering across timelines. The last thing I remembered was the emergency brake in my hand, solid and real, while everything else became nothing. Then darkness, then antiseptic smell and beeping machines. I opened my eyes in a hospital room. Bright Montreal morning light streamed through the windows. A nurse was checking my IV, and when she saw I was awake, she called for the doctor. They told me I'd been found unconscious at Halifax station, collapsed on the platform before train 447 even departed. Severe exhaustion, they said. Stress-induced breakdown. The night train had left without me and arrived in Montreal with no conductor at all, just confused passengers and an emergency stop. 3 weeks you've been here, the doctor said. Your family's been worried sick. 3 weeks. But my phone, charging on the bedside table, showed only one unread message from an unknown number. Thank you for setting us free. We can finally rest now. Take care of the dog for us. Carol. I looked at my hands. Still had the frost burns from where Jacob grabbed me, though the doctors called them stress-related dermatitis. In my wallet, folded and hidden, was a modified rule card. Not the blank one Jacob offered, not my original, but something new. The rules were different now, written in my own handwriting, though I didn't remember writing them. Rule 1. The living and dead may share passage but not destination. Rule 2. All souls require tickets, but payment varies. Rule 3. The black dog guides between worlds. Rule 4. The guardian maintains boundaries, not prisons. Rule 5. Every passenger deserves acknowledgement. Rule 6. Some trains run on tracks, others on memory. The nurse brought my belongings. My conductor's uniform cleaned and pressed. My cap, somehow still perfect. And at the bottom of the bag, a photo I'd never seen before. The 1987 crew of Train 447, all 43 victims, and the crew standing on the platform at Halifax. In the corner, barely visible, a black dog. They were all smiling. I knew then that the night train was still running. Would always run. But different now. The boundaries between living and dead hadn't collapsed. They'd been rewritten. The supernatural wasn't contained anymore, just managed, guided. And somewhere, probably in car 1, probably in my usual seat, a black dog was waiting for its conductor to return. I checked myself out against medical advice that afternoon. The psychiatrist had used words like trauma-induced psychosis and stress hallucinations, but I knew what I'd seen. 3 weeks of medications and therapy sessions couldn't erase frost burns or explain how 43 people thanked me in my dreams every night. So when I walked into Halifax station at 11:30 p.m., the security guard just nodded like he'd been expecting me. Thought you were on medical leave, Torres. Cleared for light duty. The lie came out smooth. My uniform still fit perfectly, though the frost-burned scars on my shoulders ached under the fabric. Train 447 sat at the platform looking completely normal. Modern cars, LED lighting, digital displays showing on-time departure. No supernatural weight to the air, no sense of wrongness. Just a regular night train with regular passengers boarding for Montreal. I climbed into car 1 and found my conductor's seat exactly as I'd left it. Well, almost exactly. Someone had deep cleaned everything. The floors gleamed, the windows sparkled. Even the air smelled like industrial-strength normalizer trying to erase something that wouldn't quite go away. The passengers looked normal too. A group of university students comparing notes, an elderly man reading a tablet, a woman knitting in the corner. Nobody's skin was translucent. Nobody aged and fast-forward. Nobody spoke in overlapping voices. At 11:47 p.m., we pulled out of the station. I started counting track joints out of habit. 1, 2, 3. And that's when I noticed the first thing. The elderly man's reflection in the window was reading a different book. Not just holding it differently. Completely different book, different hands, maybe even a different man. When I looked directly at him, normal. In the reflection, someone else entirely. 4, 5, 6 joints. The woman's knitting needles moved in patterns that produced fabric, sure, but the shadows they cast spelled words on the floor. Thank you. appeared and disappeared with each stitch. 7, 8, 9. One of the students laughed at something on her phone, but the laugh came from 3 feet to her left, where nobody sat. Her mouth had moved a full second after the sound. At joint 15, I stood up. Had to check car 2, make sure the paying passengers were settled. Normal conductor stuff. Nothing supernatural about walking the length of my train. The door between cars opened smooth and silent. Someone had definitely oiled it recently. Car 2 was half full, maybe 20 passengers, all facing forward, all normal except they weren't blinking, any of them, 20 people, and not one blink in the 30 seconds I stood there watching. They breathed, they moved, they turned pages and typed on phones, but their eyes stayed wide open like they'd forgotten that part of being human. "Excuse me," I said to the nearest passenger, a middle-aged man in a Canadian's jersey. "Can I see your ticket?" He handed it over without looking at me. The ticket was valid, Montreal destination, coach seat, today's date. But the paper felt wrong, too smooth, too perfect, like it had been printed on something that wasn't quite paper by something that wasn't quite a printer. "Thank you, sir." He took it back, still not blinking, still not looking at me. None of them were looking at me. They were all watching something else, something in the space between spaces that normal people couldn't see. I found it tucked under my conductor's seat when I got back to car 1. A new rule card, laminated and official looking, but the text was in my handwriting. I knew because I write my G's weird, with a little hook that nobody else does. Rule 1. The freed dead still need passage. Guide them gently. Rule 2. The living passengers must not see. Maintain the veil. Rule 3. The black dog walks between. Trust its judgment. Rule 4. Write new rules as needed. Reality is negotiable. Rule 5. Every soul has a destination. Help them find it. Rule 6. You are the bridge. Do not break. What the hell does that mean? I asked the empty car. The black dog materialized in its usual seat. Not suddenly. More like it had always been there and I'd just now noticed. But it was different. I could see through it to the seat fabric beneath, like looking through dark water. Its eyes still glowed amber, but softer now, less warning light and more guide lamp. It wagged its tail. In all my time on this route, through all the supernatural horror, I'd never seen it wag its tail. "Hey, boy," I said, and my voice cracked. "Girl?" I never asked. The dog patted over and pushed its translucent head against my hand. I felt it, warm and solid and real, but also not, like touching a memory of warmth. That's when the first one appeared. She manifested in the aisle like morning mist forming reverse, particles of light gathering into shape. Carol Meyer, 8 years old, blonde pigtails with red ribbons, but not the cycling horror I'd known. Just a little girl, solid enough to cast a faint shadow, transparent enough to see through. "Hi, Mr. Mike," she said, and her voice sounded like it came from very far away and right beside me simultaneously. "Thank you for helping me stop hurting." "Carol?" I stood up so fast my knee hit the seat arm. "You're supposed to be free. You walked into the light. I saw you go." I did go. She smiled, and it was a real child smile, gap-toothed and genuine. "But the train remembers us. We can ride sometimes when we need to, when you need us to." "I don't understand." "You broke the prison but not the connection." She walked, actually walked, not glided or floated, to the window. "We're not trapped anymore. We can leave. But some of us like to visit. Some of us have things to finish." More shapes formed. Brian Miles coalesced near the back, tipping his salesman's hat. Scarlett Freeman appeared beside her daughter, sane and whole, one translucent hand on Carol's shoulder. A dozen others materialized in seats, standing in aisles, existing in the spaces between spaces. The 1987 victims. All of them. But peaceful now, chatting quietly among themselves, looking out windows at a countryside that probably wasn't the same one the living passengers saw. "This is impossible," I said. "You made new rules." Carol pointed at the card in my hand. "Better rules. We can exist without hurting. The living can travel without seeing us. Everyone gets where they need to go." The train slowed for Truro Station. Some living passengers got off. New ones boarded. And among them, visible only to me, dead passengers did the same. A woman in a Victorian dress stepped aboard, nodded to me politely, and took a seat that existed in her timeline, but not ours. An old man in a WWI uniform helped her with luggage that wasn't there. "How many?" I asked the dog. It tilted its head, and suddenly I understood. Every train that had ever run this route, every passenger who died connected to it, hundreds of years of souls all sharing the same space, separated by veils I was somehow maintaining. "Mr. Torres." I turned. The trenchcoat man stood in the aisle, but not Jacob Marshall. This was all of them, every failed conductor who'd been absorbed into Car 3, speaking in harmony. Their form shifted constantly, showing glimpses of different faces, different eras, different failures. "You freed us from the mass grave," they said, "but we cannot leave. We are the train's memory of what happens when guardians fail. So, you're stuck here?" "Not stuck, assigned. We are your warning, your reminder, your counsel when needed." They gestured to the ghost passengers. "You wrote rules that let them exist without harm, but rules need enforcement. Boundaries need maintenance. And if I don't? If I just walk away?" They smiled with a dozen mouths. "Then the veils collapse. The living see the dead hunger for life. The train becomes what it was before, a prison of horror instead of a bridge between worlds." I looked at Carol, who was showing her ghost teddy bear to the black dog, at Scarlett, who was finally at peace, at Brian Miles, who was making phantom sales pitches to nobody and laughing at his own jokes. So I'm trapped too. Just a different kind of trap. "No." The collective conductors shook their heads in unison. "You can leave any time, but someone else would have to take your place. Someone who might not write rules as kind as yours." The train rolled on. We passed through Amherst, Moncton, more stations I'd traveled 100 times. At each stop, ghost passengers got on and off, some from the 1800s, some from last week, all existing in their own time streams, all sharing the same space, all visible only to me. At Rivière Baudet, Carol stood up. "This is my stop," she said. "But you died here." "Exactly." She smiled. "I get to choose now. I can visit where I died or where I lived or nowhere at all. That's what you gave us, choice." She walked to the door, then turned back. "The rules you write matter, Mr. Mike. Every word changes how we exist. Be careful. Be kind." She stepped off the train and dissolved into morning light that shouldn't exist at 2 a.m. Not gone, just elsewhere. Else when, else how. Scarlett Freeman followed her daughter, pausing to squeeze my shoulder with a hand I could barely feel. "Thank you," she whispered, "for letting me be her mother again instead of her monster." One by one, the 1987 victims departed at their chosen stops. Some went to where they died, some to where they'd lived, some to places that meant something only to them. Brian Miles was the last to go, getting off at Montreal just before we arrived. "Hell of a thing," he said, straightening his phantom tie. "Being dead, but still commuting. But it beats the alternative." Which was being dead and screaming. He tipped his hat. "See you on the return trip, Torres. I've got phantom encyclopedias to sell to ghosts who can't read." He walked through the station wall, laughing at his own cosmic joke. At 6:47 a.m., we pulled into Montreal Central Station. The living passengers disembarked, never knowing they'd shared space with centuries of dead. The black dog faded until it was just a suggestion of shadow. The collective conductors remained, standing in the aisle like smoke given form. "Every night you'll write new rules," they said. "Every night you'll guide them, the living and the dead, separate, but together, traveling the same rails toward different destinations. For how long? Until you find someone better, or until you become us, or until the train itself decides it's done remembering." They handed me a blank rule card. "Tonight's rules," they said. "Write them well. The Victorian lady needs to reach Quebec City. The WWI soldier is looking for his regiment. And there's a child from 1923 who's been riding in circles, afraid to get off. How do I help them? By being the bridge, by maintaining the boundaries, by remembering that even the dead deserve kindness." They faded out, leaving me alone in the empty train. Almost alone. I could feel them all, every ghost that had ever ridden these rails, waiting in the spaces between spaces for night to fall again. I pulled out my pen and started writing on the blank card. Rule 1. The dead may ride but must not linger. Rule 2. The living remain unaware unless they choose to see. Rule 3. The black dog determines who crosses between. Rule 4. Every soul gets 3 chances to reach their destination. Rule 5. The conductor guides but does not force. Rule 6. These rules expire at sunrise. New ones must be written each night. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Good rules. The 1923 child's name is Thomas. He's afraid of the dark. Maybe add something about keeping the lights on for scared ghosts? Carol. I smiled and added, Rule 7. The afraid may request light, and it shall be given. Outside, Montreal morning traffic was building. Normal people heading to normal jobs, never knowing that every night their commuter train became a ferry between worlds, never knowing that someone sat in car 1, writing rules to keep them safe from seeing too much truth. I walked to the crew hotel, my shift officially over. Tonight I'd be back. Tonight there would be new ghosts to guide, new rules to write, new boundaries to maintain. The psychiatrists were wrong. I wasn't crazy. I was just the only one who could see both sides of the veil, and someone had to keep them separated. Someone had to be the bridge.